Hello and welcome to today's Industry Solutions webinar. My name is Lisa Stewart and I'm the Marketing and Communications Coordinator here at 12D Solutions. Our Industry Solutions webinars are designed to provide insights into overcoming challenges in an evolving industry in more effective and efficient ways. We'll keep running these webinars regularly and recording them for posting on our YouTube channel with links through our website. Our previous webinars from this Industry Solutions series, as well as those from our training series, are available online if you missed those. During this presentation, you'll be able to type your questions along the way, as shown on the screen, and we'll answer as many as possible throughout the webinar. At the end, I'll forward your questions to the presenter. Today's webinar, Managing Multiple Offices, will be presented by Mitch McPherson. Now more than ever, we are facing demands to draw on talent pools beyond our local site or office. As we face an almost two-speed economy, the industry is searching for more effective ways to leverage remote staff, offices and contractors locally, regionally and globally. Traditionally, large datasets of the AEC industry coupled with consumer-grade and even generic business solutions have made work sharing impossible. Today, Mitch joins me to discuss how 12D Synergy can make sure you avoid these inefficient workarounds and enable an efficient and collaborative workforce beyond your local office. Mitch is the Business Development Manager for 12D Synergy in Victoria and Tasmania. Previous to this, Mitch was part of the 12D Solutions Marketing Department, focusing on developing the 12D Synergy brand. Over to you, Mitch.
Thanks, Lisa, for the introduction, and thank you everyone for joining us today as we tackle the unique problems that come about with the multi-site setup or managing multiple offices. Now, I thought I'd start you off with this slide here. You've probably all seen it, but the reason I guess I'm bringing it up at the moment is it mightn't have been the driving force behind them purchasing. The reason that they have 12D Synergy might not have been, so they can manage remote staff or manage multiple offices, but it's certainly something that every single customer on this board is now reaping the rewards of. They've all adopted some sort of process. Surveys in the field's probably an obvious one, to manage staff remotely. And if we look at the smaller end of town as well, these guys are also doing it. They might have people working from home. They might have a flexible working arrangement. They might bring a contractor in when they're running red hot and they just need that extra bit of support for a project. All of our customers are essentially managing multiple sites with 12D Synergy. And if you are one of those customers, well, hopefully I can show you a few tricks that you mightn't have considered in the past. So what are we going to talk about today? Well, to start with, we're going to quickly rehash on what Worksharing is. We'll discuss the challenges that you're currently facing with the systems you have in place now, or systems you may have in place. We're going to talk about how 12D Synergy out of the box will improve, I guess, that work sharing between multiple sites. And we're going to tell you how you can further optimize your data transfers with file replication. So to start with, what is work sharing? Well, I guess to put it in context of the industry, it's in some areas it's running red hot now. You think land development in Melbourne and Sydney is red hot. We've got infrastructure booms in both of those areas as well. Queensland's got a fair few highway projects running at the moment, and there's some quieter areas as well. So now more than ever, we've got this work spread across this, two-speed economy, and we're trying to work with people who aren't in the same office as they traditionally would have been. We're talking about distributed offices who are both regionally and globally placed. We've got people working from home because there's such a demand for skills at the moment that the old 40 hours in the office a week isn't cutting the mustard for them anymore. They're trying to take stuff home. They're working across different job sites. They might be, like I said before, contracting in to a larger organisation to help them meet their demands. So essentially work sharing are the systems and processes which enable it to be more efficient. So we'll get this slide up and going. It's essentially what we're meaning by it. It's the process of bringing together different collaborators in different locations for the greater good of the cause. So that might be your project specifically, or it could be the overall business. And the problem that we find is that with these dispersed workplaces is that the necessary skills aren't always based locally. Instead, we're selecting teams based on geographical convenience. So what we'd really like to be doing is we'd like to pick our teams on skill sets, or as we're well aware, the light and shade of the industry across different markets, as I was mentioning before, can mean that one office is actually working over capacity. So you might have 3 offices and one is flat out and the other 2 are quite quiet, they're in quieter markets. So we want to be able to bring them in as well on the projects to help balance that workflow. So essentially we want to be able to make your workforce more agile by giving you access to your entire workforce on different jobs, leverage remote skills, meet the needs of your overall business, optimize your workflows across these different locations is a big one. And we want to be able to, when a job comes into the business, we want you to be able to really select the team that you need irrespective of where that job is based. So for the purpose of this presentation, let's say that we're all working for a mid-sized consulting engineer in Queensland. So God help us, we're all Queenslanders. And we'll say we've got a head office in Brisbane, smaller offices in Toowoomba and Cairns and Rocky. So a sizable job comes into the business. Now, how can we leverage all the staff in different locations? Some of the offices are fairly quiet. Well, at the moment, the standard practice of work sharing are what I would consider workarounds. They're things like taking copies of files and zipping them up to, or taking copies of files onto hard drives, zipping up projects and uploading them to Dropbox, transferring data across VPNs. And the issue with a lot of these processes are that essentially you're making copies of files, and the problem then is that we end up with duplicate data sets, which overwrites can happen pretty easily and can be fairly costly on time and money, and we end up losing data integrity and workflows. And the end result of wasted time and money is wasting time and money on data transfers, resurrecting previous versions. You might be merging project changes because you've now ended up with 2, current versions of your project. So now it's time to kind of merge those together and try and rebind that project. So alternatively, some business opt in for a fly-in, fly-out method to avoid all these hassles. And now this is expensive in its own right. You're essentially avoiding all those problems, but you're now forking out some cash for it. And some of users will like the fly-in, fly-out, but others will hate it because you're being taken away from home. But from a business perspective, it makes sense to try and avoid that if you can, because you think about the cost of travel, flights, accommodation, meals. You might have some living away from home bonuses. What I'm really saying with this slide is that the workarounds that we're currently using are either high risk or they're very expensive. So we should try and avoid them altogether. Now, the problem is that to draw on these different locations, you need to be transferring data, but the problem is that the data is so big. We're talking about anything from a DWG right up to your mobile laser scanning, which is a terabyte. Transferring this data is time consuming. It's a strain on your infrastructure. It's a lot of data to go down the pipe, and sometimes it's just impossible. But the good news is that it's only around 20% of your business that's owning that data. So that data adds up to around 80% of your business's data. So it's the 80-20 rule. So if we can fix this problem for 20% of your business, we go a long way into fixing it for your entire organization. So what we need is a central repository for all your documents and data, somewhere where the whole business can collaborate on. And there's no prizes for guessing. I'm talking about 12D Synergy. Now the 12D Synergy master server is that central repository. In our scenario here with our consulting engineers, where our head office is Brisbane, so that's where we've located that central server. Everyone's connecting to that central server no matter where they are in the organisation. So 12D Synergy, how it's going to resolve some of those problems I just mentioned there is it's a check-in, check-out system. So no two users can override each other's work, and there's no need for file duplication. So it's just single source of truth for your whole organisation, as we like to say. And you can enforce the benefits of everyone being in the same environment. Then is now you can enforce file structure and design standards, naming conventions. You can keep on top of your project progress a lot easier. So you think about tasks and workflows and reports. You can have a quick glance at where everything's up to, rather than sending out an email. Sending out an email or sending out, calling out to one of your staff members to see how it's all going. But you're probably going to say, well, that's all well and good, but we've still got to transfer the data between the different sites. How are you going to help us do that? Well, beyond the single source of truth, 12D Synergy can also improve your work sharing by optimizing your data transfer. So firstly, out of the box, 12D Synergy's intelligent data transfer will reduce the amount of data that you are transferring. So let's say you've got a 12D model project here. It's 1200 files and it's 900 megabytes in size. Now, a really cool thing about 12D Synergy is that it actually can recognize when you've changed a file or when you haven't. So it'll only transfer the file when you've changed it. Now you consider something like 12D Model, which is a folder of files essentially. You're really starting to see a reduction in the amount of data that's being pushed down the pipe, because it's now recognizing, hey, you've only changed 100 files of that 1200, so we're going to transfer a lot less data. So on average, we've worked out, or a client has worked out, I should say, is that you're only transferring on average, around 9% of the data. So that's to say a reduced data transfer by up to 91%. Now, this means that you're transferring data a lot faster, or you're having access to your data a lot faster, I should say. So the end result of this is saved time. So a client crunched the numbers on a 320 megabyte project. So their old system saw a 13-minute wait time for data transfer to open the project, and this was both initial and subsequent access. So anytime they access that data set, it's 13 minutes. Now, subsequent with 12D Synergy, initial access was reduced to 5 minutes, and subsequent access was reduced to within a minute. So we're talking about some real time savings here. And time saved equals money saved. So it worked out to be around 4 hours per user per week they were saving in data transfers. And once you crunch the numbers on that, they estimated, once they accounted for savings in wages, times, avoiding flights and hotels, they saved $43,200 on the project. Now, to put this into perspective of the size of the project, this project ran for 12 weeks and only had 6 users collaborating on it. So it's actually quite a sizable saving for quite a small project. So most of you are fairly familiar by now with the 12D Synergy landscape, but for those who aren't aware yet, I'll just quickly go over it so there's no confusion. 12D Synergy lives on a server, and that server can be in your office or in the cloud. Now in this scenario here so far, we've got people connecting to that Synergy server via the client on their machine in the local area network, or the LAN. So these guys are internal in the office, and all the data on the 12D Synergy server is encrypted, as you can see there. But what you can do for remote access is you can get your IT to configure the firewall, and now all of a sudden you can have a civil designer working from home. It's pretty much the standard practice there. And to give you an idea, this is also the same method for many of our surveyors who have adopted 12D Synergy. They're out in the field, so it's the same technology for that. And these guys, because the data that's being transferred is reduced, a lot of these guys are just connecting via 3G or 4G connections. Might connect their laptop to a hotspot. So this is all well and good for individuals from home or on site. It's even fine for some small offices. But if you have multiple people connecting to the same office, or your remote office might have limited bandwidth, well, we can make further optimizations for your data transfer with the File Replication Server, or FRS. So let's go back and have a look at remember our scenario here, our business. So let's say we've got employees at the remote office, and every time that they're requesting data to be transferred from that master server, it's got to transfer down to their workspace, which is on their local C drive. So let's say that all these guys in the remote office have requested the same data sets. So here we have 6 people requesting data. In Toowoomba we've got 3, and in Cairns we've got 3. Now that data set will be transferred to each individual workspace on their local machine. Now, intelligent data transfer will improve this step, but obviously we're essentially sending the same data out a lot. And the first time they request that data, because they haven't got any changes locally, or they don't have that file stored locally, that they're actually transferring the entire project, or all files within the project. So it can have it can be a fair bit of data that you're sending down the pipe, and it can have a significant effect on your bandwidth. But if you have file replication servers at these remote offices, your users can connect to them, and further optimizations for your data transfer can happen in this scenario, because now we're only going to transfer that data once to each office. So that project, as soon as someone calls for it in Cairns, it will be sent to the Cairns local FRS, and everyone in the office will then be connecting to the FRS there to get that data set. So this significantly reduces the strain on infrastructure. Now we'll get into the nitty-gritty of how we're transferring our data, and just for a bit of housekeeping, we're talking about 2 different types of data transfers, I should say. So the first one is metadata transfer. This is information about jobs, folders, tasks, checkouts, file locations, attributes. These are all those cool bits of data that we're collecting in 12D Synergy to help you find your data, search, get updates on where your projects are up to, your files are up to, all that cool stuff, and to enforce that single source of truth as well, which is probably the most important part of that. Then we're talking about the actual file transfer, or the actual data involved within those files. So they're the 2 different types of data being transferred with the FRS. So the landscape changes a little bit once you have an FRS or a few FRSs in your system. So let's start with our internal, or we'll say civil designer based in the Brisbane office. So they transfer he's transferring his data there between his workspace and the central server with standard intelligent data transfer. That's what I was explaining to you in the first part of this presentation. Now, green shirt, let's say he's out at Cairns, and it all happens a little different for him. So the file transfer between the FRS node and his workspace is standard intelligent data transfer, but all of his metadata is being transferred directly to the central server, and this is all about keeping that single source of truth. That's why that metadata has to go back there, so it's always up to date, the metadata. So you're talking about, in things like that, we're talking about checkouts, whether data is checked out, attributes, things like that. Now, between the server and the FRS node, this is where things start to change. Firstly, data is further optimized by only transferring deltas. So we're talking about the byte size level, or the byte level changes within a file. So we're no longer talking about changed files, we're talking about the changes within a file. And you can also further optimize the data transfers with synchronization rules. So synchronizations between the FRS occur either on demand when a user requests a file, and the reason for that is, hey, we want to keep that single source of truth, and we also want you working with the latest data set. So when you request that file, it's always going to transfer that on request. So it's really good. Make sure that you're not working with outdated files or data sets. But we can also set up rules to dictate when synchronizations between the FRS and the master server occur. So let's say, we might say DWGs aren't overly large in the grand scheme of things, so we'll only we'll synchronize those every hour. We'll do it fairly frequently, and it will keep everything up to date. But then we might say, well, ECWs are really large, so let's transfer those overnight when no one else is in the office, and so the I guess the strain on the bandwidth or the amount of data that we're pushing down the pipe isn't noticeable to the overall team. Now, the other thing that's really cool about the FRS is that it goes beyond, I guess, that scenario where I'm talking about, hey, this is going to help you work share regionally. There's also the scenario where you might be working on a really large joint venture or a large road project where you're, collaborating and work sharing with offices all over the place. So a large project might come into the office and you say, well, we need to expand the team to our centers of excellence out in Bangkok and Manila, because we just simply don't have the manpower or the person power, I should say, to design this project or to work on this project. Now, previous processes for this scenario is that you're probably zipping data and uploading it to the cloud, as we said before, sending copies via VPN, email. But another common one in this scenario is robocopy, which actually has a 24-hour turnaround, so it's really inefficient. And we get all those same outcomes again, but you've also got additional issues that we need to resolve. So there's communication breakdowns and language barriers. There's potentially less skilled employees, and I don't mean that they're not as good as a designer. They just simply, they might not be a native to the same software programs that we are, that we're getting them to work on. They might have poor file naming conventions locally, and they might have poor drafting or different, I should say, design and drafting standards to the one that you're working with in your project office or your site office there. So really what happens is you end up with this back and forth with remote staff to make improvements, and then you're not happy with improvements and you end up redoing the work all yourself. And I think everyone has experienced that pain, even myself, and I'm not even a designer. So to avoid all of this, we need a single source of truth again. So in this scenario, we're saying like our Sydney and Brisbane offices are the main design centres for this project. So we'll put an FRS at Brisbane to optimise the data between those two sites. But let's say Manila and Bangkok offices have rather limited bandwidth. So this is that limited bandwidth scenario I was talking about. You put an FRS in each of those locations and you can optimise your transfers that way. So to summarise up today, how can we resolve these additional issues that happen when you have multiple sites, whether they're regionally or globally? Well, out of the box, 12D Synergy is going to give you faster data transfers through intelligent data transfer to start with, but also by optimising your data transfers with FRS, with everything I was just telling you about then. We're going to provide you with that single source of truth for all files centrally located, enforce your file naming standards and your folder structures that you require in the project. So it doesn't matter if you're drawing on a regional office or a global office. This is the environment that we're all working in, and these are the rules on those folder structures and naming conventions that we've set up. We have version control and revision history. So when you're working with people that you probably haven't worked with before, there can be some some workflow changes or some design issues you come across, especially when you're collaborating internationally. So there's a couple of things to make sure you want to be doing, and that's one is always working with the latest data set. So it doesn't matter which office you're in, you know that when you go into Synergy and you grab that project, you work on that DWG, that is the latest drawing available for that file. And then the other thing is there any issues with the design or drafting or any issue on any file in the project, 12D Synergy actually captures each revision, and it's a really simple rollback process. So you can roll back to the last legible version of that file really simply. The other benefit of that, which a lot of guys sometimes run with, is that you can design a few what ifs or hypotheticals, and you're not going to lose a heap of time. You can roll back at the click of a button. And also we want to improve collaboration. So there's sometimes cultural barriers between even different offices. The Rockhampton office and the Brisbane office might have their slightly different ways they go about it, let alone Manila and Sydney. So 12D Synergy offers a range of collaboration tools as well, which help break down these issues. So you think language barriers, etc. We can help you with those with tasks, notes, forums, and workflows. So I guess what we're saying here is that there's no longer a need to chase everyone for minor details about where a file is up to, because you can actually jump in the dashboard or the report and see what is happening with those issues. So to summarize, the demand for work-sharing systems are continuing to rise. We've got market pressures creating a surplus of jobs and a shortage of skills. There's generational changes that are pushing for a demand to the modern workplace. People want flexible working conditions, and we can probably thank the likes of Google for that. And it hasn't really kicked off in this industry because the data sets are so large that once you go out of the office, it's just a really big problem. We want to improve profitability and efficiency through making your business more agile, and also allowing your business to operate on quality, not availability, with their staff. So out of the box, you'll see dramatic improvements with Worksharing, as I was talking about that intelligent data transfer before. But in data-heavy environments with regionally based offices or locations with limited bandwidth, using 12D Synergy out of the box with intelligent data transfer is probably only scratching, well, not probably, it is. It's only scratching the surface on the efficiency savings you can experience. You can see much greater benefits by optimizing your data with file replication servers. And I don't think we're pretty short on time looking at this, so I've taken up most of the half hour that I said I would, if not a little bit more. So I think I'll try and get out to everyone. If you have any questions, feel free to pop them in, and we'll reach out to you via email. I'll give you a call. If anyone's interested at all in a 12D Synergy demo, please feel free to pop the word demo in that comments box, and I'll reach out to you or get someone, your local 12D Synergy salesperson, to get out to you and give you a demo. Alternatively, there'll be a I've lost the word for it. There'll be a survey at the end of this. Just fill that out. There's a question there if you'd like an obligation-free demo of 12D Synergy. And thanks everyone. Back to you, Lisa.
Thanks, Mitch. The recording of today's webinar will be available on our 12D Model and 12D Synergy YouTube channels in coming days. Keep an eye on our emails and social media for more great upcoming webinar topics. If you need to contact us in the meantime, our details are on the screen now. That concludes our presentation for today. Thank you all for attending, and we hope to see you at future webinars.